To write SQL code, I'm specifically using MySQL Workbench, but you can use the editor of your choice. And the first thing I'm going to do is view my table. So the table that we're going to be working with today is called students. So I'm going to do a select star from students. This is saying, show me all the data within the students table. And if I click this execute button up here, that will run this query. And then you can see the data in the output down here. You can see Abby here is in the 10th grade. She has a GPA of 3.1. She does get school lunch and so on. And if we go back up here to our first SQL query, what we've done is we've selected all the columns from this students table. And we did that by specifying a select clause and a from clause. Now, this star means all columns, but we can also specify the exact columns we want to display. So, for example, we can say we want to see the student name, the GPA, and whether someone gets school lunch or not. Now, I'm going to run this query again, and this time I'm going to use a shortcut. So I'm going to do a command enter on my Mac, and that will run that code for me. So now you can see here, this is a lot cleaner. I only see these 3 columns of data. So with this first query here, we've been able to display 3 columns of data from our students table. Now next, let's only show students who get school lunch. So you can see here that Abby and Catherine get school lunch, but Bob does not. So let's filter our data to only the rows where school lunch is equal to yes. So to do that, I am going to copy my query from up here, down here. And I'm going to add one more clause, and it's called the where clause. And I'm going to say, I only want to see the rows where school lunch is equal to yes. And I'm going to do a command enter to run that again. And now you can see that only the rows that contain yes are displayed. And the nice thing about this where clause is you can actually additional filters. So let's say I only want to see situations where the GPA was greater than 3.3. Now, if I run this one more time, you can see these are students who get school lunch and have a high GPA. And we were able to filter that by using our where clause. So moving on, let's try to sort the students. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this query from up here, copy it down here, and we are going to sort these students by their GPA. I'm going to add on an order by clause. I'm going to say order by GPA. So if I run this again, you can see that the GPA is going from lowest to highest here. So in ascending order. Now, if I want to reverse that, I can add a descending here, and that will make my GPA go from highest to lowest. So with this example, you were able to see what an order by does, which is sort your data. So at this point, we have gone through 4 clauses that you'll see again and again. Select, from, where, and order by. The next 2 clauses that we're going to go over are a bit more complex. But stick with me, we're going to go through this step by step. So the next thing we're going to do is try to look at the average GPA for each grade level. To do that, I'm going to start a fresh query. I'm going to say select all from students again. And if I run that, here is my student data, and I want to know the average GPA for each grade level. Let's just start by looking at grade level and GPA. I see all these grade levels here and all these GPAs here, and what I want as my output is a grade level column, so 9, 10, 11, 12, and then for each grade level, I want to know the average GPA. So to do this in SQL, the first question I ask myself is, what do I want each row to represent? And in this case, I want each row to represent a grade level. So what I'm going to do here is add another clause called a group by, and I'm going to put in grade level because that's what I want each row to represent. Now that I've specified what I want each row to look like, I'm going to go back up to my select clause to specify which columns I want to display. So the first column I want to display is grade level, and then the second column I want to display is not just GPA, but the average GPA for each grade level. So what I'm going to do here is add an average function around this. And now if I run this query here, you can see now I have for each grade level, what is the average GPA? And to make this look a little bit nicer, I'm also going to sort this grade level column, and I can do that by adding an order by grade level. And if I run that one more time, I get this clean output where I see for every grade level, this is the average GPA. And I was able to do that by using a group by clause. Now again, the group by clause is a bit on the tricky side, but the way I like to think about it is I'm grouping by whatever I want to see in each row, and then I select whatever I'm grouping by, along with some way that I'm aggregating the data for each group. So in this case, I use an average. You can also use other keywords like a count or a min, max, and so on. So this was an example of a group by. Now I'm going to build on top of this group by. So I'm going to take all this code here, paste it down here. And what I want to do now is show the grade levels with an average GPA below 3.3. So if I run our current code, you can see here, these are all the average GPAs. But what I want to do now is only return the ones where the GPA is less than 3.3. So I only want to return these 3 rows here. Now, the way that I'm going to do that is by using something called the having clause. So at this point, you might be thinking, why am I not just using the where clause? All I'm trying to do is filter the data here. However, in this case, I'm not just filtering my raw data, I'm filtering my group by data. And anytime you're filtering group by data, you're going to use a having clause. So right after I group my data, I can add a having clause where I filter this data by average GPA less than 3.3. Now, before I do that, I'm going to actually make one more tweak up here. So right now, this says average GPA with these parentheses here. And down here, we also see that average GPA with parentheses. So I'm going to rename this so that it's all lowercase with an underscore, which is a standard way to name columns in SQL. And I'm going to delete this having temporarily. Now, if I've run this, you can see that the only thing that's changed is this column name is now called average GPA. So now I'm going to use that with my having. I'm going to say I only want to return the rows where average GPA is less than 3.3. And if I run that, you can see I only get the 3 remaining rows here. So the main takeaway here is that having is a clause that allows you to filter any group by data. To summarize everything we've gone through so far, we're going to call all these clauses we've just covered the big 6. These are 6 keywords that you're going to be using again and again when writing SQL code. Remember, select lets you choose which columns to display, from allows you to choose which tables you're looking at, where allows you to filter your data, group allows you to group rows of data within your table and aggregate them in some way, having allows you to filter your group by data, and then finally, order by allows you to sort your data. So one interesting thing about SQL is when you're writing your SQL queries, your clauses always have to be in this order. Now, you don't have to include all the clauses in each one of your SQL queries, but whatever you do include has to be in this order. So let's say we just wanted to view all the data in our table and sort that data. We would use select, from, and order by, specifically in that order to get the output we're looking for. Now that you've been introduced to the big 6, which are the keywords you're going to be using in the majority of your SQL queries, I just want to introduce a few more SQL concepts to round out this intro video. So first, I want to introduce 3 keywords that are used very often outside of the big 6. So I'm going to use these to modify some of our existing queries. Let's start with limit. If we scroll all the way back up to the top, if I run this first query where we viewed our table, you can see that a lot of rows of data were returned. But let's say we didn't want to see all the rows of data. We want to limit our results. So what I can do is add on a limit keyword here, and I'm just going to limit our output to 5 rows. So now if I run that, you can see I just get 5 rows of data here. So that is the limit keyword. Next, I'd like to introduce count. And to do that, I'm going to run this second query. So if you remember from before, with this second query, what we did is we looked at students who receive school lunch and also have a high GPA. Now, let's say we didn't want to see all the information in the output here, and we just wanted to see the number of students who meet both requirements here. What we can do is a count star. And I'm just going to comment everything to the right here. So now only this code here on the left is going to run. Now, if I run this code, you can see star counts the number of rows in that output. And now this output is telling me that 4 students receive a school lunch and also have a high GPA. And that's the power of count. And finally, I want to show you how the distinct keyword works. So to do that, we're going to go back to this query here where we use an order by. And if I run that one more time, you can see in this case, I'm ordering my GPAs descending. Now what I'm going to do is modify this query so we're only looking at GPA. So let's delete all these other columns up here. So I'm only looking at GPA. and I don't want to filter the data at all, so I'm going to delete that. Now, if I run this query here, you can see that I have all the GPA values descending, and some of these values are repeats. So let's say I wanted to only look at the unique GPA values. To do that, I can add an extra keyword up here. So I'm going to add a distinct keyword up here, and if I run this query here, I no longer have those repeats or those duplicates, and I'm left with just the unique GPA values. So scrolling down to the bottom again, the keywords that we just covered were limit, count, and distinct, and these are really commonly used in addition to the big 6 that you see up here. Now, the last concept I want to cover is a more intermediate topic, and it's something called a join. So what a join allows you to do is work with multiple tables. So far, we've only worked with one table, the students table. So let me just show you all the data in the students table one more time. And you can see here's the students table that we've become really familiar with. Now, in addition to a students table, we also have a student grades table. So if we take a look at that, you can see we have some different information here. We can see that for this semester, for this class, this particular student got this grade here. And this is a much larger table here. What you'll notice is that these two tables are connected by a student ID. So in this student grades table here, you can see this column has student ID. And then if I go back to the students table here, you can see that our very first column, the ID column, also had a student ID. So what we're going to do here is join together these two tables so that we can show the final grades for each student. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to start with the select star from... And up to this point, we've only been working with one table, the students table. And now we're going to add in the student grades information as well. So I'm going to do a left join student grades. And that's going to combine all the data in the students table with the student grades table. And whenever you're doing a join, you have to specify what columns those two tables have in common. And that's what you're going to join the two tables on. So in this case, we have our students table with the ID column, and that's going to match the student grades table with the student ID column. So I'm going to add a semicolon at the end and run this code here. And you can see in our output that we have a ton of information now. We have all the students, all their detailed info, as well as their grades. Now, this is a lot of information, so I'm just going to select a few columns. I'm going to select from the students table, the ID column, and then also from the students table, the student name. And then from the student grades table, I'm going to select the class name and the final grade. So I'm going to do class name and then student grades, final grade. And if I run that code here, you can see this much cleaner table where I have for each student the grade they got in all their classes that semester. And I was able to do this by joining these two tables. And specifically, I use something called a left join here, which will keep all the student information from this left table. Now, this is just an introduction to joins. There's so much more you can do with joins, including making this code cleaner, using different types of joins, and so on. But the main takeaways that I want you to leave with here are these big 6 clauses, along with these keywords down here. And those are the basic SQL concepts you need to know to start reading and writing SQL queries on your own.